Welcome to part 2 of the Sources of Reliable Information presentation. In the first presentation, I discussed, again, kind of the concept of good and bad information, but then I also focused on asking and being able to answer clinically relevant questions. Questions that we may ask after evaluating our client, talking about his or her goals, and then things we want to find out. We talked about good and bad sources of information, and I spoke a lot about peer-reviewed research. In this presentation, I want to talk and define what peer-reviewed research is so you clearly know what it is. And then I want to go through some of the mechanics of how to find this information so that you can answer those questions. And again, I'm going to show you a variety of different sources, and then in separate videos, I'll actually take you step by step through how to utilize some of those resources and answer these clinically relevant questions. So again, hopefully this presentation will give you some more information about what this high quality information or research is and how we can utilize it to help benefit the clients that we work with. So what is peer-reviewed research? I keep saying that. Well, peers are people that, again, you would work with, people like yourself. When it comes to peer-reviewed research, that is, the term peer there is individuals who have a similar background, similar knowledge as the researcher that submits an article to a journal. So peer review is basically a process by which research is evaluated for its quality. Its quality will include things like the methods that are utilized, the accuracy of the methods, the conclusions that are based on the data that they gather, etc. So basically, if I want to do a research study, I design it, I get subjects, I collect data, I write this up as an article in a professional journal, and I submit it to that journal. Specifically, I submit it to the editor of that journal. That editor, typically in most journals, is then going to take that article and forward it to a group of experts, 2, 3, 4, 5 experts, and those are considered to be the peers. And typically it's sent to them without the originating author's names. So if I know that person, they're my buddy, I won't review it differently. So it's forwarded to these experts, and these experts pick that article apart. They'll evaluate the methods that are used, the measurements that were taken, how many subjects were utilized, the different, tools that were used to gather the data, and really determine whether or not the methods were valid. They also look at, were the methods rigorous enough? Did they just study 2 people, or did they study 50 people? Again, 50 people are going to give us more reliable, more accurate, more valid measures. And then finally, they'll look at the conclusions that were made based upon that data and the recommendations that the authors made. So again, what it does is it ensures that the information published in these journals is accurate, it's of high quality, and it makes sense based upon what we know. Those articles that are submitted to journals either get published, or they get sent back to the author for revisions, or they may be flat out rejected. And again, a lot of times this research is rejected because it isn't high quality enough. So when we read an article that's in a peer-reviewed journal, we can generally assume that it's been done in a way that's going to be accurate and of high quality. Again, so that's why that information should be your source that you rely on the most heavily, because it's going to have gone through this peer review process. Now, when we search for peer-reviewed articles, which we're going to talk about how to do here in a little bit, you don't always see that term peer review used. Sometimes they'll use the term scholarly or academic. So in some of the search engines you may use, you can check a box that says you only are interested in finding sources that are scholarly or academic, and that generally means they've gone through this peer review process. So again, the goal of using peer-reviewed research is to use quality research in making these decisions for our client, answering these questions that we may have. And there are 5 characteristics I wanted to mention related to quality research. One is quality research is systematic. It's always planned out in advance. You identify what you want to measure. You design the study. You collect the study under very rigorous standards. You control as much as possible. And then finally, you evaluate that data to make conclusions. It's logical, meaning that we examine the procedures very closely that are used to evaluate and make conclusions. It's empirical. Empirical meaning our conclusions are based on data, not opinion. It's based upon the data that we got, whether we agree with or disagree with the findings. Again, it's based on the data, not on our own personal opinions or the opinions of the researcher. It's reductive, meaning that the relationships need to be demonstrated and established from the data. And it's replicable, meaning the actions are recorded and enough information is provided in the study so that you or I could reproduce it. We could redo the study and probably get similar findings. This replicable, part is important because, again, I often want to look at their methods, especially if they're evaluating a couple different training techniques. I want very specific information about those training techniques because then I want to potentially use them with my client. So how do we find answers to the clinical questions? So if I ask myself the question such as, what's the best warm-up to do prior to a 100-meter sprint, I can go to several different resources. Now, there are a number of online search engines that can be utilized that will search multiple journals. So we don't have to go to one journal at a time, look at their table of contents and try and find an article. We can use these search engines to search thousands of journals simultaneously based upon, again, search terms that we may use. Now, some of the ones that may be available to you include here, if you're a student here at CalU, you can use our library website. If you're a student at some other college or have access to college resources, you can use their library website. In general, those are going to be the best choices because not only will they provide, ability to search a lot of different indexes, they often will provide the greatest number of full text journals that you can access immediately, meaning you don't have to request the journal or go physically find the journal. You can actually download a PDF of the full article right there at that time. Google Scholar is a free option if you don't have access to a library website. Also, again, we'll search scholarly journals and academic journals to provide peer review resources. And again, often will provide a full text link to the full article. And then PubMed is part of the National Institutes of Health and also searches Medline and is a good resource as well. So again, really any of those three will probably give you the same type of information. But again, the library website will provide you the most full text options for you to download immediately. I'm going to make a video for each of these tools to give you a quick kind of glimpse of how they all work and how we can search them, etc. So once you find an article, that you think is going to be useful in helping you answer your question, we need to read the article. Now, these articles can be really tough to read. I mean, if you've read some peer-reviewed research, there's lots of numbers, there's statistics, there's a lot of information that may or may not be of much use to you. However, there probably is information that is of interest. So here's my take on how to read this research. You don't necessarily need to read the entire article. And again, as you start to read articles, you're going to get better and better, more efficient at reading them. Generally, again, I will read specific journals that I know that are relevant to my field. I get them typically either hard copy or via email. A link from the professional societies that I'm a member of. So I'm a member of the National Strength and Conditioning Association. They have a couple great journals that I really like. Every month a new journal comes out. I'll go to the link, I'll look at the table of contents, and if there's any articles I'm interested in, I'll read their abstract. Their abstract will typically give me enough information to understand what they studied, what they found, and decide if I want to read the article in any greater detail. If I do read the article in greater detail, to be perfectly honest, I often don't spend a lot of time reading their methods or their statistics unless I'm really interested in their methods from the perspective of what did they do to their clients. What exercise program did they use? How many repetitions? What was the weight, etc. But again, I don't necessarily delve into that. I primarily will read the abstract, and then I'll read their introduction and their conclusion. And that usually gives me the information that I need. If I need to delve more deeply into the article, I can. I also am typically pretty critical of the research. Did they study subjects that are similar to the ones that I want to apply it to? If they were doing a study looking at strengthening techniques in Olympic skiers, and I'm looking at how to improve leg strength in elderly individuals that just want to prevent their chances of falling, decrease their chances of falling, well, that article may not be the best choice for me. So I look at some of the similarities and some of the differences in their research compared to my particular population and my questions. So again, when I read the research, I'll keep that in mind. Hey, this article maybe applies to my subjects, but not as closely. However, this other article may much more closely match my subjects or my client that I'm attempting to find an answer for this question for. Now, there's a lot of research that's out there. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about all of these, but I do want to talk about a couple. First some articles are specific studies where they took 30 people and they did something to them and they did some type of a measure. That can be really interesting, but it only tells us about that one intervention in that one study. I like to start off by reading what are called review articles. These are a type of analytical research. Review articles will look at a whole bunch of individual research studies that have been examined, and give me kind of a snapshot of what overall they found. So again, if my goal is to improve strength in the legs, there's hundreds and maybe thousands of studies that have evaluated different techniques to improve leg strength. By finding a review article, I am going to find, therefore, a study that actually evaluates all of those research studies for me and kind of comes up with an overall conclusion. So literature reviews are often a great type of a research to use when helping to answer these types of clinical questions. A more specific type of review is what's called a research synthesis or a meta-analysis, and they actually will run new statistics based on all of the previous studies that have been done before. But I always like to look and start with review articles if they're out there. If not, then I will rely on some of the other types of research that are available. So finding the research, how are we going to do this? Once we have a clinical question, we're ready to go find some research. Well, the first step is to go to one of these search engines and then search for articles. Well, how do we do that? So if we have our clinical question, let's say our clinical question is the one we said at the beginning related to which type of warm-up will have the greatest benefit for the 100-meter dash. We have our question. We now have to define our search terms. What terms are we going to put into this online search engine to find our articles? Generally, you should be thinking of search terms as outcome measures. What is our goal? And then what are the interventions? So for this search, I would certainly use sprint speed potentially as an outcome measure. You could use 100-meter dash, but then you'd miss anybody that did a 100-yard dash, or potentially you might miss, people that are doing a 40-meter sprint or a 40-meter time, etc. So maybe you want to do sprint speed as an outcome measure. Your intervention would be warm-up, or you may want to actually search static and dynamic warm-up as search terms. And then you may also want to include a population if that helps you limit your results to a specific group. But again, you need to define those search terms and enter them into a search engine to see what you find. Now, again, I'm going to create a video of doing this, demonstrating how to do all of these searches. But again, you need to come up with those terms. Those terms are going to be key because they are going to determine what articles you will pop up, what research will be found. So you have to be very, very careful. Generally, I like to cast a wide net first and then narrow if need be. So generally, for the search that I just mentioned, I would search warm up and I would search sprint speed and then see what I get. If I search that, my guess is I'm going to get 30,000 articles. You then can add additional search terms to narrow the results. So maybe I add static warm up. Maybe I add dynamic warm-up. Maybe I add both so that I find articles that only have compared one to the other. But again, I can narrow the results by adding search terms. If I only get one article or no articles, then I would need to widen my results, which means I need to make my search terms less precise and again, find some things that maybe are less studied. So again, we have to, try to come up with a number of articles that are most relevant, most useful to us, and we do that by utilizing various search terms. Once you find some articles, often you'll be able to download the articles directly as a PDF. Sometimes you won't be, and you may either have to interlibrary loan it if you are a college student, or you may have to go online and pay for the article. Generally, you're probably not going to do that. You're probably going to just use the abstract for the information. Anyway, but you need to then read the articles and see what they say, and that will help you answer your clinical question. So, the locations for finding this peer-reviewed information, I've mentioned them before. In general, a college library website will be the best choice because it will allow you to access the greatest number of full-text journals, again, without having to pay for any articles. And the nice thing is, if they don't have full text, you find an article that's perfect, but it doesn't have full text available, you typically can fill out a form online and interlibrary loan the article, and your library will go out and get it for you and email it to you. So at the end, you still end up with a PDF of the article. Google Scholar provides a simple way that you can search for scholarly literature. Now, this isn't Google. This is part of Google, but you have to go to the Google Scholar search bar to add these terms. From there, you can find, again, articles, theses, books, abstracts, etc., from academic, again, scholarly sources that have gone through the peer-reviewed process. And then PubMed is a free search engine through the National Institutes of Health that will search, among others, Medline, which is an online index of scholarly, medical and biomedically related journals, as well as other journals that would have information that's useful for us. It will also search online books that are available. So finally, again, I hope that what you've gotten from this presentation is, again, an understanding of the importance of always pushing yourself to learn new things. And the way that you're going to learn new things is by reading the latest literature in our field. So again, whether you're just for fun, cracking open a journal and reading it, or going out and trying to answer questions that have come to your mind working with clients, etc. Either way, you're going to be learning new things, which is going to enhance your skills and make you more valuable to your clients, make you more valuable to your employer, and so on. Use the literature that's out there to advance your skills and knowledge and, again, make you the best clinician that you can possibly be. Professional society journals, I talked about those, and professional society websites are a great way to kind of stay on top of the latest trends and are a generally reliable source of information. So whether you're a member of IDEA or ACSM or NSCA, or any of those areas, again, make sure that you are reading their journals, reading their newsletters. It'll help you stay up on what the latest trends are in our field. Don't be scared, however, to dive into the peer-reviewed literature that's out there by going on to Medline or Google Scholar or go to your college website to search for articles on a particular topic. You'd be surprised that the questions you ask may be answered very clearly in the literature and give you really good guidance on choosing the best exercises and choosing the best programming for your client. Again, benefiting them and you. Finally, again, always be aware of unreliable sources of information. There's a ton of information on the web that's inaccurate, biased, and again can potentially be harmful to your clients and also harmful to you professionally. So again, when you do read stuff on the web, not that you shouldn't be checking some of those websites that are out there, always go to the peer review literature to back up their claims and make sure that you are choosing the best types of exercises and the best interventions for your clients. So anyway, hopefully this presentation gave you some information about what a peer-reviewed resource is and how to find them. It's really not that hard, and it's not that hard to read them and to stay up to date on the latest information that's out there and test out the claims of the latest fad.